Eagle 6 in the track.
Roger.
Viper 1 bombs away. One's going to climb high above 20. You're south.
Eagle 6 radar contact. Eagle 6 is visual.
And it goes left.
Well, hello. Welcome back to the DCS SITREP. This is the show about the world's premier combat flight simulator for the home PC, DCS World, which is brought to you by Eagle Dynamics. But I'm your host, Prickly Hedgehog. This week, we talk new weapons for the Phantom II, and another third-party developer signals 2 new aircraft which are in development, apparently. Let's begin with some overview stuff, because naturally enough, last week's whopping patch saw the introduction of the Afghanistan map as well, but the ED team didn't push out too much news this week. They did promote some new weapons coming to DCS World, which should fit into our Cold War scenarios rather nicely, and we'll come back to that topic very shortly.
Major 3, Group Rod 20519, 9000, hostile.
Major 3.
While the patch introduced a lot of fixes, AI adjustments, and as mentioned, that pretty stunning looking Afghanistan map, at least in my opinion, not everyone agreed with me, there was mixed reaction from community members about all of this, particularly VR users who reported problems running the game after the injection of the patch, some suggesting some workarounds as to how to fix issues with foveated viewing, it seems was the primary problem, but there were other people too talking of issues with the game, stuttering, frame rate and performance drops, and other general quality of life issues. Now, as I mentioned last week, I had not been able to get my Pimax Crystal headset up and running after disconnecting the Crystal Light that I was actually testing, so I hadn't really observed all of these specific concerns. Not that I'm denying that they weren't problematic for people or that they weren't actually occurring. Someone actually accused me of being biased by not mentioning VR and showcasing my recordings of the Afghanistan map. Admittedly, that video wasn't a showcase of VR with running Afghanistan, and the reality was I simply hadn't fully tested the map in VR, as I wasn't completely thrilled with the tracking system that I have with the Crystal Light. I was trying to troubleshoot that. I ended up unplugging it to go back to the Crystal, but couldn't get that to run. So I was intending to troubleshoot my VR problems and record more footage on a more comprehensive review of the Afghanistan map. However, post-video, a series of unfortunate events made this one of the most costly weeks for me in recent times. Firstly, we needed to replace Mrs. Prickly Hedgehog's car, which had a minor transmission issue, which we did that on Monday. It was getting to the point that it was going to be too expensive to fix against the value of the vehicle. So we did that. That was a lot of money. And then Tuesday morning, the CPU on my computer went out. I elected to buy a new one of those. That arrived on Thursday afternoon, and I'm still working on getting everything back up to scratch. So if the sound quality of this particular video sounds a little bit different, I do apologize. Now, I crashed my mountain bike Tuesday morning and banged myself up pretty darn good. That was a pain in the ass. Actually, it was a pain in the knee and the elbow and shoulder, and also hit my head pretty hard as well. So to cap that off, I then got an insurance bill from my earlier knee troubles for around about $1,000, which they said was due now. The insurance bill arrived for the car and the house, and then the new computer and the new car. It just has been a terrible week. Tens of thousands of dollars spent in a matter of days. So not good just when I'm prepping to head back to New Zealand to catch up with the family. I could have done that. Could have done without that. So needless to say, after all of that, I haven't done any VR testing this week, so I apologize again. If that makes me biased, well, bite me. Anyway, ED stated that they are working on a hotfix stemming from last week's patch, which I suspected they may do. We've seen it before. It's happened on previous big patch updates. VR users generally have been more impacted by major patches. Most obviously, it occurs in jumps in DCS core development, where the graphical fidelity receives a huge boost but ends up balking the VR experience. Most noticeably between updates like going to 2.8 or even going to 2.9, these are major shifts in the game's development, and as much as I love VR, it is a technology which doesn't do well when there are major updates to the game. It isn't exactly plug and play just yet. I love it, but it does take a lot of tweaking. Now, ED has emphatically stated that they are working to resolve these issues, some of which have come about from the introduction too of the new launcher system. So some people really had an issue with the launcher system. I haven't had those issues, and I'm hoping my VR system gets back up and running and I can do the testing that I wanted to do on the Crystal Light, which I think is going to be a good headset. We've got a lot of work to do in that area though before I can produce those videos, and it's clashing with my impending vacation. But let's turn to the newsletter and what ED was describing with regards to new weapons.
Pablo 6-1, Cowboy, big in, glass, broken, unreadable.
Cowboy, Pablo 6-1, as fragged.
And they started with the AGM-12 Bullpup, also known as the AGM-12B. Now, the Bullpup was one of the first mass-produced guided air-to-surface missiles, they say. It entered service before the Vietnam War, and it was a manual command line of sight, or MCLOS missile, which meant that the guidance was provided by the pilot through manual steering inputs. Yeah, old school. DCS currently features 3 variants of the Bullpup: the AGM-12A and the original 1958 variant for the Navy, which had a 250-pound warhead and an Aerojet Mark 8 solid motor, initially designated ASM N7. AGM-12B, the 1960 improvement with a Thiokol LR-58 rocket or liquid rocket motor, USN, US Navy, ASM N7A, and US Air Force GAM 83A designations, and a 1964 derivative with a much larger warhead and an LR-62 liquid rocket motor, the AGM-12C. Now, the 3D models for this, and you'll hear this theme, were provided by Heat Blur Simulations. Now, all variants of the AGM-12 featured a canard cruciform aerodynamic configuration and a bang-bang steering system, which is stabilized through a 500 degree per second roll rate. In addition to the engine nozzle, the rear of the missile included a pair of tracking flares that burned with an increasing intensity over time. To improve the controllability of the missile, the bang-bang canard steering was modulated. Effectively, the canards deflected in short pulses, whose length and frequency depended on both the angle of deflection and the rate and duration the stick was moved. A basic form of auto trim was also used. Now, a major limitation of the system was its tendency for the control axis to roll left because the roll rate increased during the acceleration to the transonic region. This was caused by delays in the control system. They compensated for that by adding a fixed offset to the roll gyro reading that did not depend on the actual roll rate. All these effects on the control system are fully modeled in DCS World, so pretty cool. Now, another system, the Rockwell homing bomb system. After the AGM-62 Walleye was introduced by the US Navy in 1967, the US Air Force awarded a contract for their own TV-guided bomb system to Rockwell. This resulted in a series of conversion kits for dumb bombs dubbed hobos, or the homing bomb system. These kits consisted of an electro-optical nose seeker section, an aft control section, and a set of strakes running along the body of the bomb. The seeker and guidance used were similar to those on the AGM-62 and 65, and it required the pilot and Wizzo to align the aircraft with the target using the seeker video feed and lock onto the target. Contrast before release, which proved to be difficult in practice. I presume when you're getting shot at as well, probably added an extra layer of difficulty. Now, different daytime electro-optical and infrared seeker kits were developed for different types of bombs, of which only the KMU 353A and B kit for the Mark 84 low-drag bomb saw extensive combat use. This configuration, designated GBU-8B by the US Air Force, was used from 1969 onward, and it is featured in DCS. The 3D model, once again, is provided by Heat Blur Simulations. Lastly, here we have the GBU-15V B. Despite the low effectiveness of the hobos, Rockwell was again contracted to continue their guided bomb development in 1974. The result was a modular system that Rockwell referred to as Modular Guided Weapons System, or MGWS. This resulted in the GBU-15-5B family of guided bombs, also known as the Electro-Optically Guided Glide Bombs, or EOGB. And the acronyms will continue. Now, initially 2 variants were developed, the GBU-15V-1B with a daylight seeker, and the GBU-15V-2B with the same IR seeker as the one used for the AGM-65D. The configuration was similar to its predecessor, the GBU-8B, with the Mark 84 also serving as a basis for this weapon. However, it had a significantly larger set of wings, a more sophisticated guidance system, and an ability to communicate with the supporting launch aircraft through the AN/AXQ-14 data link. Neat. Now, these new features significantly expanded the envelope of the weapon at low altitudes compared to the GBU-8B, and it allowed for employment without a line of sight to a target at the time of release. Hugely advantageous for the launching aircraft. The weapon followed a 3-stage guidance logic. After a separation maneuver, the weapon entered mid-course mode, where it would follow a lofted trajectory along the release course. After the Wizzo spotted and identified the target, they would point the seeker at it and switch the weapon to transition mode. It would then turn to target heading and maneuver to keep the seeker at a constant look-down angle, allowing the Wizzo to adjust the impact angle. Finally, the Wizzo would select terminal guidance mode, in which the bomb would either be automatically guided into impact if locked on, or flown to the target manually. Now, the team advised that the GBU-15 is in development, so it's not clear yet also when these other weapons will be slotted into the game for us to use on the Phantom 2, unless I'm misreading something here. And those wondering about the symbiosis here with heat blur, from my understanding, ED Designs all the weapons for DCS. However, they do receive input from third-party developers for specific weapons. The Phoenix, for example, from the F-14, and obviously the weapons in this case as well. Now, additionally, Heat Blur Simulations has or is providing ED information for the RWS system in the game as well. If you've seen the system in the Phantom 2, it does differ in the sounds and symbology used. It does seem a little bit better than the, or at least aesthetically, it seems a little bit better than what we have in the existing games, aircraft like the F-18 and the F-16. So keep your eyes peeled for more work in that department as time goes on. My understanding was that that was going to be something that Eagle Dynamics used in its other aircraft as well. It would be the benchmark for RWS systems within the game. Stay tuned, I guess, is the short answer there again.
24,500.
2-1, Cowboy, understand your request. 3-minute DOT. Affirm, that is Charlie Hotel India Papa Ship 3-1.
Now, the last portion of the newsletter reported that the summer sale continues through to the end of July, so bargains are up to 15% off many of their products. By way of apology for the delay in this last patch, which remember was slated for June 26, and it went a couple of weeks over that, and also the Chinook, which is supposed to be in game, isn't, and they are doing a little bit more work on that as well, and that certainly got some attention from members of the community. Wags has done at least one video now on a cold startup for the Chinook. Now, not covered in this week's newsletter from Eagle Dynamics was a summer update newsletter from Magnitude3. Now, this was something I was hoping to include in last week's video, but I apologize, that just wasn't going to be the case. The length of that video was already significant, and it's just not practical to inject another 15 minutes into that particular video. Otherwise, it would have been about 45-50 minutes long. This is information from Magnitude3, and they are updating their existing projects and hinted that they are also working on 2 new products. They didn't say what those products were, but here we go. We'll start with the Kristen Eagle. So early in the year, work began on their older modules, they said, and they decided to start with the Kristen Eagle 2 as it's the easiest. So the artists have remodeled the airframe from cowl to tail, and this should ease some of the load on the graphics cards that we have, they say. Areas of significant improvement include the cowl shape and the air intake louvers, fuselage panels, and tail section shape. The wings are okay, but they will see some slight improvements in the navigation light sizes and some access hatch details. Cool. Other than the above mentioned, they're going to be releasing a one-piece canopy along with a 3-blade prop CE2 variant. Following that, the aircraft will be modified into a full-fledged CE1 with an IO 540 6-cylinder engine. As of now, there's no information if there will be an updated price to the Kristen Eagle, similar to what Eagle Dynamics did with the A10C2 and also the KA50 Black Shark. So they are aware right now of a few annoying bugs, such as the floating numbers from the radio and fuel gauge. They have open support tickets with Eagle Dynamics and are waiting patiently for those to be attended to. So stay tuned for that update. Moving on to the warbird that many of you are desperately waiting for, and that is news on the Corsair. So work continues on the flight model and R2800 8W engine performance. Flight model tables are being generated and modified as needed to match the performance and flight charts that they have on hand. They are using computational fluid dynamic data to generate help with creating the tables. They'll provide a more in-depth review when they have reached a position where they're absolutely ready to showcase the comparing charts against the actual data. They also decided to develop some extra items into the Corsair. The first are tires with different treads that'll be optional for livery artists via Lua programming. It will include Dunlop, Firestone, BF Goodrich, and Goodyear. Gun bays are currently under construction and almost finished. Now, as I've previously mentioned with regards to this aircraft, I did suspect that the flight model was likely one of the big challenges for the team, especially with an older aircraft like that, if they don't have all the data that they need. So hopefully we'll see that in-depth review sooner rather than later. I know a lot of you have been asking about it. We've seen it showcased in pictures, and also it featured pretty heavily in the 2024 and beyond video by Eagle Dynamics, but it's yet to appear in game. So it's one that we're looking forward to, especially the World War II fans out there. And they insisted at the end of their blurb that, again, none of this is vaporware. We are working on it. They just don't provide regular updates like a lot of the third-party developers. Flying Iron Simulations is the same. They do sort of a couple of times a year, they'll give you an update, but they don't bombard you with tantalizing, gossip type pictures that some people do complain create the hype but don't really deliver. Now, accompanying the Corsair, remember, there is a series of assets that also includes the Essex class aircraft carrier. The team described that they have added more detail on the catapults, which they hope they'll have a working bridle system for in the future. Elements of this system include the tensioners, the bridle catch, claws, and cables, and the wood planks that help line up the aircraft. Those have not been placed yet. They know there'll be questions regarding this and other aspects of the carrier operations, but they simply can't answer all of them at this stage. They'll update as soon as they can. Again, I wonder how closely the team is working with ED on this, given that their Hellcat also slots into a Pacific theater, and the Hellcat will need an aircraft carrier to land and launch from. Right now, the focus of this development is based around the Marianas Island map theater, which ED is also building. We did see a lot of assets showcased in the 2024 and beyond video, and also images from the Marianas. So that alluded to a pretty beefy package for both of these modules, which I think they're going to need to embellish the sale of both aircraft. Again, stay tuned for more information on that. We'll see if it comes to fruition anytime in 2024, because as I've also said previously, we have a truck ton of modules being plugged into the game right now. Now, the team referred to us a 2022 newsletter regarding information on the MiG-21. So apparently it's on hold right now. I didn't think this was strange, but I think it was just a way of pointing us to, hey, this is what we're working on with regards to that, but that modules updates are temporarily suspended while they work on the Corsair. So that seems to be their primary focus right now. They apparently got hold, I think, of some German aircraft to laser scan, and also some manuals and other information, which is going to help improve the flight model and just the general aesthetic of the aircraft. So we'll have to wait and see how that manifests itself down the road here. One thing that was missing from the update, they didn't talk about the F8 Crusader, which is also in their stable, remember, and the team also announced, like I said, 2 new modules. They didn't tell us what these projects were. They did tell us that they have no effect on our core team. So in other words, it's not taking away resources from the work that they are doing. The 2 aircraft are apparently, or at least the 2 modules are progressing nicely as the models are transitioning from making normal maps to starting the animation process. Again, once more, we'll have to wait and see how these shape into actual airframes or assets of some kind in the game. Well, regardless of the, I guess, mixed bag of news there from Magnitude3, some good news, some perhaps more obscure news, and some head-scratching news as to what they are actually working on, it was positive to see the team still reach out and keep in touch with us and let us know that the modules that they are working on, particularly the Corsair, are still in play, and we're just going to have to be a little bit more patient for those things to come out, unfortunately. So that brings us to the end of this week's DCS SITREP. Like I said, not as much news this week. Hopefully we will see a patch fix for some of the issues that were raised by the community with regards to the new launch window and some of those VR concerns, and hopefully some of those general performance issues that people brought to my attention from last week's patch. I've had a little play on the Afghanistan map, and I'm hoping to get my VR headset plugged in here today so I can do a little bit more exploring and see what, if any, issues may crop up from that. So fingers crossed I don't have too many problems. I did pick up a Corsair Vengeance computer, and it's running a 4090 card in there, so we'll see if I have a little boost in performance. Certainly I'm hoping that will help me with my video rendering. I was putting a lot of strain on my GPU, I think, with some of the work I was doing. It was whizzing away, and I've had some issues with the old motherboard. I think it was always slightly defective, to be honest, because I had it crashing early on. I thought I'd rectified that. I had some cooling issues with it, so I think I did some damage early on to that CPU, and then eventually it said, yeah, I've had enough, which is unfortunate. Well, I hope this video found you well. Thanks again for tuning in. Thanks for the likes, the subscriptions. That's wonderful. It helps the channel chug along, as I always say. Thank you again. We'll see you next time. Cheers.